Explain to people why it is so important that we all pay attention to what's happening with our voting rights, and explain what they can do about it and why it affects them, whether they're left, right, or center.
Thank you so much, Whoopi, and thank you all for having me back. We have to remember that the right to vote is separate from partisanship. The right to vote is about our citizenship. And regardless of who the targets of these egregious bills are, the result will be a weakening of our democracy. And we're seeing that happen in Texas, in Florida, in Georgia, but also in Iowa and around the country. When we see political leaders who are wresting power away from local elections officials in order to overturn their decisions in the future, when we see the response to increased participation by communities of color result in a decrease in access, when we see states in unison pushing laws that respond to not the reality of the 2020 election, but to the lie told about that very election, then our democracy is in danger. It's up to each individual how you vote when you get in the booth. My mission is to ensure that no one is precluded from voting or impeded in their attempt to vote because of the power grab that is currently being exercised by the Republicans. But let's be clear, it was done by the Federalists, it was done by Democrats. Anytime a party in power feels that their best way to win is by constricting the vote, we are all in danger and we should all be in arms. And the way to push back is to go to stopjimcrow2.com. We give you a set of rules and opportunities to lift up your voice, to keep the pressure on, because it's working. These bills are moving, but they are getting weaker and weaker. And we can also push for federal action that will make our democracy stronger.
Yes, it's very dangerous what's going on right now. And this comes down to Republicans needing to back Trump's big lie that the election was stolen. It's the same reason Congresswoman Liz Cheney is going to be ousted as GOP conference chair tomorrow. Senator Lindsey Graham says the Republican Party can't grow without Trump. Is he right? Is he right? Why are they clinging to the cult of Trump, may I ask? He's a loser.
I think the attention to Donald Trump is a symptom. It is not, however, the disease. The symptom is that he found a shortcut to leadership. He found a shortcut to actually doing the work. And he decided that the only way to win was not by adapting to the populace that he was to serve. It was by gaming the system to remove voters he found inconvenient. That's what the insurrection on January 6th was about. And the fact that we are watching the Republican Party, one of the two standard bearers for our democracy, rest their hopes on success by removing their own people from leadership rather than listening and adapting and internalizing what should be a natural belief in the United States, that every vote counts and that no voter should be impeded from being able to cast an eligible ballot. That should be deeply concerning to people of all parties.
Yeah. Last month during a hearing on voting rights, Senator Kennedy grilled you on the details of Georgia's voting bill in a puzzling exchange, really, that later went viral. Let's take a look.
Tell me specifically, just give me a list of the provisions that you objected.
I object to the provisions that remove access to the right to vote, that shorten the federal runoff period from 9 weeks to 4 weeks, that restrict the time that a voter can request and return an absentee ballot application, that eliminate...
Slow down for me, because our audio is not real good here.
Certainly.
Could you start over for me?
Certainly.
Is that everything?
No, it is not. No, sir. It limits the...
Okay, I get the idea.
Now, you've been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize for your work in this specific area. You're an expert in this area. So given that, what did you make of Kennedy's line of questioning, and what was going through your mind? I just didn't understand what was going on.
I served in the Georgia General Assembly for 11 years. That line of approach is not unusual, and it's usually designed to throw the speaker off, to demonstrate the lack of content, or to just filibuster time. But my approach is always to try to educate. I would presume that anyone asking the question legitimately wants the answer. And the challenge with these laws is that this isn't about the reductive notion of whether you have to have an identification or the reductive question of whether you can have water in line. It's about the fundamental question of who is permitted unfettered access to the right to vote and who is impeded based on how they vote or the perceptions of which communities are inconvenient to the Republican Party in this moment. No matter who we are, we know that this is affecting communities of color. It's affecting young people. It's affecting the disabled. It's going to affect elderly people in states that are requiring new identification. We know that this is a redux of the same type of behaviors we have seen time and again in this country, where to block power from being shifted to communities that are found inconvenient, the party in power instead shuts down access, and that should be anathema to who we are. And that's why I keep pushing back. This isn't a partisanship conversation. This is a peopleship conversation, a citizenship fight. And that's why we should all be on the same side, saying no to these laws and saying yes to the voting rights provisions in the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act.
Even though I agree that this Georgia bill is founded on false claims of election fraud, some fact checkers have pointed out that the bill will actually expand the number of in-person early voting days in the state. In fact, Georgia has far more early voting days than Democratic states like New York, New Jersey, Delaware. And the New York Times said the law's voting provisions are unlikely to significantly affect turnout. It could plausibly even increase turnout. But what's missing from that argument, in your opinion?
So there are two parts to this. One is that, yes, Georgia has early voting hours and we have early voting access. The problem is that the Republicans responded to usage by restricting that usage for a larger portion of the population. Yes, for 40% of Georgians who did not enjoy full access, they've expanded, and that's good. But at the same time, they restricted access for others. They restricted the hours. And this is a debate we're having with the Washington Post fact checkers, in part because their argument is that only the facial language in the bill counts, and we have to look at the actual performance and behavior. And so it's not enough to say that the law is what's on paper. The law is also how people interact with it. That's why we change laws. And what is changing is that these laws were used successfully by voters that are being found to be inconvenient, and restrictions are being put in place. The second reality is that for so many voters, there are already hurdles that they have to cross, and adding additional hurdles is incontrovertibly wrong. We know that there are states that need to do better. That's why I'm also a fan of the For the People Act, because the quality of our democracy shouldn't depend on our geography. But more than anything, any state that starts to restrict access because they found too many people voted, that should be deeply problematic and chilling to anyone. And this is something that the Republican lieutenant governor said. This is a solution in search of a problem, and it is designed purely for the power grab that we are seeing play out across this country, and that should be concerning to everyone.